So I guess just for anyone who may have forgotten, because last time I saw you, you did not have such a magnificent, magnificent beard. Um, yeah, you're. Uh, well, why don't you go ahead and tell me? I'd introduce you, but yeah.
Sure. I'm Igor Estraykh.
Mhm.
I think back in the day, Lieutenant Igor Estraykh, and fresh out of armor and school and ranger school, and a fresh butter bar straight into Diyala Province.
And so, when did you come over to 573? That was mid deployment in about 2007.
Yeah, I missed the first 2 months, so I got there, I think
Hmm.
late October, early November, right as Turkey Bowl 1 was wrapping up, and I guess spent about a month in the S3 shop, kind of helping out, learning the operations, and
Hmm.
then I took over Red Platoon right as you guys were coming out of Turkey Bowl 2.
Yeah, I remember that well because you were you were my LT. But yeah, that's very cool. So,
Yeah, so it was a
um,
first platoon and Alpha Troop with Mike Few and the gang.
mhm. And we were at Fob Warhorse at that time, was it?
Um, nope, we were still. Well, I did the handover back at. Oh gosh, what was the name of the where we were stationed?
There was Fob Caldwell, and
Caldwell.
we we had so many little outposts. When
Yeah,
people
so
ask where were you stationed, it's like I don't know. You choose one.
I think I remember we did it. We did a couple of the call to move to Fob Warhorse, and yeah, start expanding and taking on the different missions. As as I think what originally we called the Council or Al Qaeda Iraq. Basically the beginnings of ISIS. We started
Mhm.
playing whack a mole with as they got taken out in places, they started reappearing in others, and we got sent to keep chasing them.
Yeah, that was a it was a very difficult fight. It was a very interesting fight. There's a lot of lessons learned, both the hard way, but also, in my opinion, we had some excellent leaders. Um, what lessons did you learn while you were with 573? And what peers did you really respect? What did you learn from them? And how did you end up putting those into use later in life?
I Yeah, I mean it was a foundational deployment for me. I was like I
Mhm.
said, straight out of kind of schooling, did all the checks, but no combat experience, and straight into probably one of the deadliest times in
Mhm.
any of our fights in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'd say that was probably the most difficult deployment I had. I did three
Mhm.
tours as a special forces officer in
Mhm.
Afghanistan, but very different from that year in Iraq. Um, a lot of lessons on life and death, on good people, on
Mhm.
what leadership really means, right? Especially joining in the peak of it after the guys have gone through some really difficult
Mhm.
combat conditions just on that deployment, not including prior deployments, and kind of taking over there and learning how to be in charge while really just shutting up and listening, and learning from
Mhm.
our platoon sergeant Gonzo, the other lieutenants who are senior, Jeff Black from
Mhm.
uh, you know he was senior lieutenant, but he was still a platoon leader, so he could always go and ask and talk. Right from our commander Mike Few. Just even the month I spent before taking over the platoon, just watching how Major Silva and um, Colonel Pappas and our XO Major Townsend, I think, how they
Mhm.
kind of handle themselves, calmly during operations, and delegated without truly micromanaging. Um,
Mhm.
the leadership we had on that deployment, was really superb. I hadn't seen that kind of a team after in my whole time in the army. Not really where it was just that perfectly aligned. There's always um, kind of different personalities and things to manage, but for whatever reason, that leadership team truly was special. So just kind of learning when to take charge at what points, when to learn and listen from the experienced folks, when it was time to sit back and let the guys and the non-commissioned leaders take charge of their elements. When a call for help, right? Like you have only so much you can control, but there's a bigger team around you with other units, support assets, intelligence. I mean, all of that very critical, especially for me and all my deployments with special forces, just because you have much smaller elements, with a lot of foreign military we're taking over, but how to leverage and use kind of all the assets around you, even without having a large team. I mean, even what we had, right? We had a 22-person platoon doing the same jobs as what's supposed to be a 40-person infantry platoon, and you had your scouts, and when guys were hurt or on leave, you're down to the high teens and still doing the same mission. So that came really useful for my time later on in special forces. And then just out in the business world, same thing, just learning the leadership lessons, how to quickly join a new team, ramp up, build rapport, build trust, and then establish your credibility, and then figure out where you're needed at those critical leadership points, and how to take charge and execute, and then step back, and also how to develop your subordinates and let them thrive, because ultimately great leadership is about building other leaders. And it's I look at it as success, when guys get good, get promoted, go to better places, can take over. I mean, that's a leadership success. That's how I've always looked at it. And I think we really had that kind of foundational team from Colonel Pappas down. Just invaluable lessons for a young, 22-year-old butter bar straight out of schooling and into the war zone.
Oh, I completely agree. The strength of personnel management is really something that I saw and I know has stuck in my mind. And like you said, being able to foster new leaders, their success also reflects on you, and everyone succeeds together instead of counting competition that cuts each other out, or sees a rising individual to cut them down and keep them in place in a hierarchy. If you foster good people and they become leaders as well, in my opinion, it reflects on everyone. You came into the unit after there'd already been a few months of combat operations. We'd already done some patrol bases, some other pretty serious things, and there'd already been a unit identity that had formed between individuals. How did it feel coming into that kind of situation? Personally, how did you manage doing that, and how did you, once you got into the unit, find your own footing and your own voice and fit within a larger team while also helping shape that team?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot. You get some of that respect just from kind of the schooling I've been, because a lot of the other folks in my officer classes and the scout school and ranger school were enlisted with prior combat experience, or some OCS officers who did combat enlisted time. So you kind of learn a lot of that on just how you come in as perceived no experience, how you build rapport, and you can't be arrogant, but at the same time, in the military, when you're in charge, you're in charge. It's when bad things happen, it's your responsibility. When good things happen, you pass it down to your team. So with you guys, when I joined, I mean, it was really the same thing. It's I saw all the things that happened during the big operations. I watched Turkey Bowl 2 from the talk, and you could see it all. Just, and then you're joining kind of as the new guy, right? But now you're all of a sudden in charge. And you guys, guys like the platoon sergeants who've been there for 20 years on multiple deployments and have the respect. And yet at the same time, they, have to salute you and answer ultimately. And so it's, I guess, it's an art you just kind of pick up over time. I would say, it started happening as we started doing missions. I mean, it's easy in the fob when nothing happens. When you start going out on patrols, you start taking context, start reacting. That's really when you find out who people are, and ultimately, that's when the guys see that you're there for them and you're there to support them and to keep everybody alive. You have to work as a team. So I think I took over, I want to say late December maybe. Probably by the time we're March April doing the Zagani operations. We're back to being another cohesive combat unit. Yeah, I took over for Mike Anderson, right? So he was already a senior
Yes.
lieutenant by the time you guys deployed. You know, kind of almost done with his platoon time, and really, really good, solid platoon leader. So I had a lot of big shoes to fill, and it took a little bit, but we got our flow going. You figure out the personalities, right? You figure out who your squad leaders are, your section sergeants, your team leaders, and you just gotta get to know the guys and go out there and trust each other as a team. Um, you know, I never really grew up shooting. Just was an immigrant, and then grew up in the city. Um, did a little bit in training, but really not that much. So Gonzo and the other guys taught me how to shoot. I mean, CQB with actually live rounds was, I didn't really learn it until we started going out on the ranges at Caldwell and other places, and that's the stuff that starts bonding. You start getting out there with the guys, and get your hands dirty and make sure that they see that if something happens, you're as qualified as them, if not better, on from the personal weapons to first aid to the crew serves. When we started going out there in small patrols, and there's 12 of you all night rotating, the officers pull security just like everybody else in the turret. You just don't have the alternative, right? When there's 3 of us in the small OP, everybody takes turns. It's those are some great lessons, because it's just like that in all my special forces deployments afterwards. So it's I'm glad I had that experience. It was, yeah.
Yeah, and I will say from the opposite side of that too, seeing you come in, Mike Anderson was with us for I don't know, since 2004, I believe. As the unit was stood up, all the training previous, we went to the Hurricane Katrina relief together. So there had been, there was a lot of history with him as a leader. Everyone knew him, knew his personality and all that. And stepping in to someone when you're already in that intense situation, that is difficult. But also seeing you go out and eager to learn, ask questions, and then also put yourself into positions like, being on an OP, or again, being in a turret pulling guard duty. That's something that some people would not do. But for us on the ground level, it made us trust that whatever we were in, our leadership would be there alongside us as well. And that really went a long way to building a team.
Yeah, I mean, pardon my French, you can edit this if you want, but I remember stirring, the shit together with the diesel
Yeah.
in the schoolhouse, wherever that was in Zagania, or
That is always a bonding experience. Yes.
you can't unbond that. That's you keep that for life.
In fairness, it's the best detail in the world, though, because no one will come and give you any other jobs when you're burning it. They look, they say, boy, your life is bad enough. They just move on. I wanted to go back really briefly to touch on, you said you came to the United States as an immigrant, and halfway through our tour, we got a lot of Iraqi army augmentees. Many of them didn't speak English. There was a lot of communication errors, and we were not a training team. We were not a MIT team. So we were just given heavily armed men with very little training of their own, very little structure and hierarchy to serve alongside us. What challenges, I'm trying to think of a good way to word it. What challenges did you perceive or face working with them, integrating both of our teams together, and also, forming a cohesive fighting force? And also, how did those I imagine they helped you quite a bit when you went to special forces and had to work with other indigenous units.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something, special forces and maybe some of the other arms, the military focus on and prepare folks to do. Just kind of having a thrust. It's tough because the language barriers, right? One thing, if you don't have enough interpreters or guys that learn the language, so you can at least do some basic communication, that's a huge barrier. And for whatever reason, I think the Iraqis we had, not too many of them spoke basic English.
Hmm.
It was a challenge, and then it's hard enough to train your own guys when you have to train somebody that starts at a very different level. It's almost like teaching kindergarten, right? Like you have to kind
Hmm.
of drop your assumptions, start from scratch, not judge. And sometimes you take good enough, right, instead of perfect. So it's yeah, I remember that. I mean, it started getting better when we started living with them on the patrol base, but just because of a lot of the things we didn't know and didn't understand, and a lot of the insider attacks and the suicide bombers, there's always that tension. It's you don't know who's vetted, you don't know what they're doing. One infiltrator could do a lot of harm, but at the same time, you're eating together, right? You're doing some basic shooting training drills and going out there because when you're out, you have to trust that everybody's going to do what you think they are. Otherwise, you have pure chaos. And definitely lessons learned. I would say every deployment after that, I certainly did have lots of foreign partners we worked with, from European special operations to the Afghanis. And you do as much as you can, pre-deployment and before you go out of the wire, to integrate. And you learn language if you can, even if it's brushing up on your own. um, I tried picking up some Arabic, while we were there, and
Hmm.
maybe towards the end it was decent. But ideally, if you know where you're going, you can probably have some of your guys who are either skilled with languages, or a lot of times immigrants just kind of pick it up just because I've had to. There's skills at learning languages. If you can do some of that, definitely helps.
Hmm.
Opening up, learning cultures, just breaking bread with folks does go a long way, at least with the ones who are open to integrating.
Yeah, that's very true and something I definitely experienced. You went to quite a few meetings with us, with various community leaders, or when Al Qaeda invited you to dinner. Um, I don't know. That always struck me as very surreal how you could go into someone's home who was dedicated to wiping you out, but have dinner with them and discuss things with them over a meal, which obviously I like because I like to eat. But um, do you have any impressions about how those kind of leadership engagements would go with the locals? The difficulties just beyond communication, but also everyone having their own goals, and you as an American officer being in the middle of such a complex situation of so many different pulls and pushes in different directions.
I, I mean, I think we were certainly aware of all the things going on. Like, luckily, Captain Mike Few was really in tune to that and kind of prepared his lieutenants and the leadership team to be open to that. Josh Kinzer was amazing.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you're acting as not just a military leader, you're semi diplomat, semi, anthropologist, social scientist, trying to figure this thing out in a really complex part of the world where, cultural, religious, tribal issues go back thousands of years. And
Mhm.
it's hard enough just to learn the history, much less understand the current nuance, and everybody's got an agenda, right? After the military, I kind of became a supply chain procurement leader in various organizations, and lots of negotiating. And those lessons I still
Mhm.
use. I mean, it's everybody always has an agenda for meetings, right? And if they don't, then um, that's another angle. But the the Middle Eastern um, leaders we met with, it was easy just to judge and say that this is the bad guy. Why would I even talk to him? But ultimately, you have to talk, right? Diplomacy has to happen at some point. You can only kill so many people. They'll always
Mhm.
get replaced, but the most difficult challenges ultimately get resolved through some kind of dialogue and negotiation, whether or not you like the person on the other end. And you have to understand the nuance. And I certainly remember those meetings. I mean, I remember, I don't know if you were there. We went into one of these police stations, and some family brought a box and there was a head inside, and like,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta please help us get the body from the Al Qaeda because we can't bury our son. And this is what they're doing. So it's it's definitely a fast, sharp learning curve on life and what the rest of the world is like for us young 20-something-year-olds.
Yeah, I had a lot of really intense experiences on that. It kind of showed me in a way that a big part of counterinsurgency doctrine is empathy. It's using empathy as a tool in different ways, and it doesn't necessarily mean that someone else, you have to accept everything they say or give into their what they want. It just means understanding where they're coming from on an emotional level and how that integrates with your own goals. And in my own personal business, I've found the number one lesson I've learned from business is that I'm not actually selling a product or a service. I'm selling a relationship to an individual. And even if it's only for 10, 15 minutes, everything else comes after that relationship. And once I've built that trust with them as a customer, if my business doesn't fulfill or if there's a mistake or something like that, it's a lot easier to deal with them. They'll take me as a human being, understanding you make mistakes instead, because you've established that communication and intent and empathy with them. And yeah, I did. That was sorry. Now I'm talking about my lessons from that deployment, but
That's
I don't know
great.
if you have any thoughts on that because it was very clear to me. Yeah.
I mean, it is. Look, I mean, we had some interesting sit downs there, and
Mm,
I remember another very clear meeting with senior Taliban commander who was
mm,
um, also a respected local leader in Afghanistan.
mm-hmm,
And you had to really understand it because, especially there, everybody was playing multiple sides, from
mm-hmm,
the government folks to the politicians to the insurgents. They had allegiances to multiple angles, and they were all out for themselves. And you had to really unwind that, and at the same time use it to get to your objectives, right? So, I mean, ultimately, we're there for a purpose.
mm-hmm. I I believe you were with us the day that we had to go to an Iraqi police station and arrest the entire police station, um, which was incredibly intense because everyone is armed and that they're all Jaish al Mahdi and they're not, but also some are government employees. And just being stuck between them, I believe we took Iraqi army from the Al Bara station for that. And just the myriad allegiances between our government, Iraqi government factions, and then tribal, ethnic, and then local because they're neighbors. Just an intense situation to sort out.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it's hard. I mean, yeah, that experiences from that deployment were definitely life changing. I still remember just between all of that and some of the big vehicle ID attacks against the bases.
Mm.
You know, just out of the blue, it's your fellow platoons and the other company out there, same situation as you. Could have been you out there. It's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do you and at the end of it all, right? We have to come back home and reintegrate and go
Mm-hmm.
on and lessons learned just about humanity too. It's right like how do
Mm-hmm.
you reestablish it all in your mind of these are people just like us under different circumstances with a different upbringing. How do you piece it all together?
I remember clearly I had that kind of I called it coming to Jesus moment, but yeah, we were bringing kids in who had been digging holes and they were going to be interrogated and they were just farm kids and they're uneducated with no hope. Oh no, are we running out of time? Sorry. Anyway, I just remembered realizing that at that moment, had it been reverse and someone had come to my country, I would have been doing the same. And it was a shock because even though they're trying to kill me and they're trying to kill my friends, at the same time, how different would I be in their shoes? And it was, I don't know, that was an interesting lesson to work through.
Yeah, I mean it's the one I remember pretty pretty clearly. I still have souvenir from that
Mm,
engagement. We were chasing somebody based on intel through the palm groves out one of the patrols, and there was an old man. I mean, I don't know, he must have been in 60s, 70s, and he had his hands inside, and I think I was there, and Barney maybe was with me, and
Mm.
chose to grab his hands instead of shoot him. And inside one hand had a grenade, the pin didn't get pulled yet, and he had a bayonet in the other underneath. Split moment decision, but I have to say, you look at him, I mean, he's just trying to protect his family out there, but
Hmm.
split second decision, and it's I don't know. How do you reconcile all of that? It's just
Yeah,
come
yeah,
to
it's
Jesus, right?
difficult.
It's
I remember having a couple of situations like that, which unfortunately after the Baqubah bombing, when we took casualties in the immediate aftermath, and all the women came down the street screaming at us, and I had thought we were under attack, and I was already emotional, and I remember I was in a very bad state of mind, and I had my I had the trigger depressed, and I was ready. And I remember it was Captain Few that came up and just touched my shoulder and said, "No," And it turned out they were bringing out wounded children for us to see, but they had sent the women first as a shield, and that was such an awakening moment for me of realizing, because what if we were wrong? They would have been more casualties. It was just such a difficult thing, but it's a lesson that stuck with me for life is,
yeah.
you know, take a
And,
second look sometimes.
look, ISIS and Hamas and others,
Hmm.
they use that tactic now, right? It's
Oh yeah. You weren't with us for the beginning of Turkey Bowl, but Sergeant Keeley and I at the time, we went to detain three gentlemen that were squirting away from, when Captain Dennison was killed, and they laid down their arms in a ditch. And as soon as we turned around, to approach them, they picked their weapons up and started shooting again. So that false surrender, just you couldn't you couldn't trust anything. You had no idea what things meant, but also, if someone's got their hands up, you can't just eliminate them. So yeah, very difficult situations and a lot of lessons that came out of it.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
oh shoot, I was going to ask a follow-on question. Oh yeah, so you talked about reintegrating after your military experiences back to civilian life and family life. Were there any lessons that you pulled from your experience with the unit that maybe helped with that, or were there challenges that you think um, people should understand better or talk about ways that would make it easier for people to reintegrate?
Just jumping into a new situation with a new team, learning how to kind of learn the culture and integrate, become part of a unit, and be a value added factor. I think
Oh,
those are extremely valuable lessons for any kind of civilian business, you
mhm.
know, environment. In general, most people I know, including myself, it reintegration stuff. I mean, it's a completely
Mm,
different life. I basically had to do a hard cut. Went to business school, learned some hard lessons with the first job. I mean, eventually you kind of figure out you reintegrate, but it's a completely different world. The rules are
mhm,
different. You got to relearn the rules of engagement, the culture, what you can do. Like, people applaud and say thank you for your service, right? You might
mhm,
get a free cup of coffee. That's probably the extent,
mhm,
right? Your what you did, and you know only go so far. But
mhm,
what you've learned is kind of the things you just need to reapply to a new environment. Figure out, where can you be useful? How can you use your skills and experiences and strengths to do something meaningful on the outside?
mhm. Well,
And
great.
it's not all rosy. I mean, it's
No, it's
definitely a unique
yeah,
journey for everybody.
yeah, yeah, it absolutely is. Um, I did want to follow on a little bit, but I'm kind of spacing some of my questions. Um, so I don't know. I guess maybe I'll just end it here for you. And thank you for talking with me and telling me, oh, you know what? If do you have any particular memories that stand out from 573 or your time with them, something that's funny, something you'd like to share, just an interesting moment that you've always kind of cherished or thought about, or you know, anything like that?
I think during Turkey Bowl too. I forgot, one of the missions I had to wake up Colonel Pappas early on in the morning, and something happened. They needed a decision. Knocked on his door on Fub Caldwell, and just comes out in his shorts, big hairy chest, and he was just happy, not grouchy. He's like, I know the mission's going on. What do you need? Like, how can I help? It's just completely shocking, and yet still have that vivid memory. I
Yeah, no, I have a similar memory with before deployment. Long story, but when I got a little bit drunk and used his open door policy, he'd just come back from the gym and was showering when he met me. So very good gentleman, very hairy. Well, thank you. Thank you for speaking with me today. And yeah, hope everything is going well in your life, and that I hope you've come out stronger and happier after your military service.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me know about the ceremony. I look forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm bringing Stephen Pavlik with me. He's in tow, so we'll be down there.
All
Which
right,
he's
awesome.
got some memories for you too. He always talks about you.
Very nice. I haven't seen Steven in a little bit since Michigan, but yeah, look forward to seeing you guys.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again.
All right.
Bye.
Take care, Ace.